Now, if you want to reduce the world's food supply, you would cut that food distribution first. So if we get down to regionalization, that means we're going to come down into seasonality only foods available. So that's going to rock a lot of people's psyche. I can't get my strawberries in January. What?
Here's something interesting, though. I always believe there's always a way around, right? There's always a way around. And if you really, again, open your heart and open your mind, and you will be guided. And so, one thing I noticed on the hatcheries was uh, duck babies, egg-laying ducks. There were plenty of those available. People hadn't thought about that. You got to do this and get in on this now ahead of time. I think that the high egg prices spiking is a warning. And I believe that there are warnings and there are gifts to you if you pay attention to them.
Good afternoon, everyone. So glad you're here. Thank you for spending your valuable time. Got Marjory Wildcraft with me. We do some talks occasionally when we see big things coming up that have to do with food disruption or chapters where you see that page in a book has moved to a new chapter in movement or the way the world's being guided. And we sit here again. The tariffs, not about the tariffs. Don't care about your TV. Tariffs, food production. All the disruptions that are happening right now, the repair parts that aren't inbound for our machines, the different chemicals that are used on the field. Not a fan, not apologetic for it. I'm just saying it's the way it is. And without that, then until we transition to a different food production system, we're still using the chemical, which isn't coming. But on the inverse, the ethylene that the plastics are made from China, we're the largest supplier in the world to China for ethylene, this base material to produce plastics. They even had a super tanker of 46,000 tons turn around. So their plastics industry is going to shutter really soon in China or be greatly dented. So where are we going to get our packing materials? Which brings us right back into fresh foods. Yeah. Know your farmers, know your butchers. All right. So this is the whole the foundation of it. And I had also put out a forecast about grain crop losses using AI running through the world's news media, consolidating losses in totals in regions in real time. And then I was able to put out a forecast of that. My big one for the elephant in the room is rice down 3 to 5% globally in production, but now that's even going to increase higher because Myanmar, Burma had that big earthquake and they're a major producer. So, as we start to wind up some of these numbers, 3 to 5 is probably going to turn into 4 to 7. That disruption across the world and those prices in those areas that are manufacturing hubs, oh my. Once you get the civil unrest running and you get into the Arab Spring type of thing in Asia because of rice prices, that even adds another whole caveat into this whole tariff caveat. So we're looking for solutions, and I'm glad Marjory is. We're going to talk about history today a little bit. And Marjory, floor is yours because I think it's important that the time is our food going to be disrupted without plastics to pack them?
Well, David, in times of crisis anywhere, and I've traveled to Cuba and I've interviewed all kinds of people from different collapse and civil war, whatever, different scenarios, and backyard food production, as humble and as simple as it seems, is what people revert to. You can't wait. You can't wait for the government. You can't wait for them like 2 years to get red food dye out of the thing. That's ridiculous, right? The food supply right now is completely toxic, and it's also devoid of nutrients. I mean, to me, it's astonishing that so many people are still, walking around and functioning given how poor the food supply is. And disease at the physical level, now we know at the emotional level, stress can, really contribute disease or thinking too much or, there's other reasons. But at the physical level, disease is very, very, very simple. And it's just two things. One, it's either malnutrition or it's overtoxicity. And the food supply we have now is completely loaded with both of those. And I think what it is such a godsend because in every conundrum or every problem we face, there's always a solution. I really believe the greater spirit, the divine, whatever you want to call it, always provides. And in this case, you can still use your hands with a bit of soil in a backyard, or even if you don't have that, a patio or a container garden or whatever, and grow food. And you do not need a military industrial think tank complex to provide food to you. And in fact, at this point in time, it's been this way for decades that you really need to be growing your own if you're at all interested in health. So that's what they do. And right now we've got, and I love that you're going to bring up this history with the Boer Wars, but right now there's an onslaught, there's a war on farmers. Washington State just issued to 30,000, mostly farmers, but also small community water users. They're putting them all in a lawsuit and saying you have to now prove your water rights. And they're creating this huge legal mess that's going to keep them from operating. And that's almost 100% of the apples. Like it's 70% of the raspberries, blackberries, almost all the fruits that you can think of come out of Washington State. And are those farmers going to be able to produce that without water? Probably not. That's Idaho. They're raising all this stuff. Remember, the past couple of years, there's been fights in Idaho over 500,000 acres of water, about 500,000 acres of cropland, and they basically shut water off, which in that area you absolutely have to have water. It's a very arid region. Now that fight was won by the people, and they got back online within a week or two, although there had been some damage done, and now they're doing it again, and they want to use that water for data centers or lithium mines or some kind of, I think there's cobalt there. So we're in this situation, and I love the serenity prayer that says, "Hey, Lord, help me to change the things that I can do and to let go of the things that I cannot change and the wisdom to know the difference." And right now, there's so many big things going on that you cannot change, but there is something that you can do. And that's, backyard food production. Are you get chickens, garden, rabbits? It's there are solutions.
And if I could interject, that's Charlie Rankin's research over in Yasana TV. So Charlie, shout out. We've done
Oh,
a
yeah.
couple interviews together. He just lives right over the border here from me, over in North Carolina, and he was raising bison originally. He was the only guy out there trying to, bring a couple bison back in and ranch those. But he's got a full working ranch, and he knows his stuff. And he's the one who put out those articles, and he's more of an investigative journalist in the ag side, much like Christian Westbrook was. So if you like that kind of research, definitely jump over and get the first analysis, especially when the stories are breaking about what this disruption in our food. It's a disruption in water, and I agree with you. A lot of it's earmarked for data centers. So where is this world going to move us to, where the AI technologies are going to require a vast amount of our resources that were generally put into the food production system? Now we're really, this thing is going to be, meeting in the road here. The electrical usage is just out of this world. So they keep squawking on about, oh, you can't burn coal. There's too many power plants. Oh, there's too many people. Yet you're bringing up something that's going to consume at least 10% of the world's electrical supply at the minimum. And what's the messaging? Oh, you need to consume less, use less electricity, fly less. Okay. But now we're coming on to the water side of things. Now, the reason I'm trying to put this together is they want something. The globalists want something, right? So you're going to be sacrificed at the altar here, no pun intended, on the religious side of
That's actually
things.
quite religious. That's actually quite accurate, isn't it?
It is, truly it is. And that's the
Yeah.
scary thing, is you and your families and your livelihoods and your land will be sacrificed in a fifth of an eighth of a second for this greater industry behemoth to continue forward. But you can see we're in this transition phase now anyway of technology, where the old, now think about it for a second here. I was having a conversation. Who was I with? Oh, Bob Kudla just yesterday, about the transition in the late 1990s of the tech coming up, totally wiped away anything that we knew in the 60s, 70s, 80s. That new technology overtook, and there was a complete wipe away of the old world, and the new one came in, and you knew it was because you could see all the, the email companies and the whole online connected spaces from MySpace, and all these things were coming up, and you saw it was a clear transition of technology, and that old world of physical typewriters, that was just gone forever. We are seeing again with AI right now. I kid you not, the movement of what we remember as like this whole email thing, and what we had this technology for the last 25 years from the year 2000 approximately, that is being completely wiped away, and the entire
Yep.
new insertion and substitution is going to be AI driven. But that AI driven needs the same resources we do, which I have gone into kind of a woo-woo fashion, thinking it's sort of in a an ethereal vibration that has been encapsulated in insulated wires across our planet for the last 100 years, built out by us for it. But it's going to consume the same resources we do. It's a living entity in a different form.
That's a good perspective on it. I do have a very hopeful angle on that, though. Is you know how Uber and Airbnb basically was a software solution to an better utilization of resources. So empty bedrooms, empty houses, cars used to sit idle for about 96% of the time. But by enabling this software, right, basically you could connect people with resources directly and very efficiently. I interviewed Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, who is a self-made billionaire and one of the world's leading experts in artificial intelligence. This was a few years ago, and they were very, very clear that by the end of this decade, by 2030, 40% of all jobs would be done by AI or robots. And I think those numbers actually might be higher. We're in that right now. There's just been an onslaught of layoffs and bankruptcies and closures. And I'm using AI. Other people are using AI. We're all finding like this is an incredible tool that actually does replace human beings. So the Silicon Valley guys and the other tech guys around the world know this, and they are actually thinking about this universal basic income and ways to implement it. There's already 11,800 data centers that have been built around the world, and I'm sure that they would like to build more. I don't know if the data centers are necessarily the biggest problem. I think the ultimate problem is here in the United States through the different legislations that they have to wreak havoc on the farming. They've been doing that in Europe. Remember a couple of years ago when the farmers, I mean, it takes a lot. Like farmers are pretty staid, common, simple, not simple, but they get doing what they do and they're not riled up. They're not activists, right? So to get a farmer to drive into town with his tractor to spray manure all over the, Capitol building, their backs are up against the wall. They've just lost everything, right? They've just lost everything. That's why they're doing it. It's not because, oh, let's do this Sunday because it's fun. So we are seeing an onslaught of a war against the farmers. And then your work has been really great about talking about the cycles that we're in with the sunspots and the grand solar maximum, the grand solar minimum, crop losses just due to natural things, the flooding and the destruction of croplands across the planet that way. No matter no matter which way you look at it, we are in a world of hurt in terms of food production.
Yeah, and again, when we come to this universal basic income or this thing, most people are not just going to sit by idle. They're going to get agitated that they lost everything and now they're stuck on a certain amount of tininess of what was their former lives. They're not going to be able to travel. You're only going to get a few changes of clothes. That money they will give you to allow you to subsist. So now let's wind it back into 1899, 1898 here, if you allow me to not misquote, because I'm not an expert on the Boer Wars here, but what's the similarity? You're going to have pockets of resistance to this thing. You're going to have pockets of people who wake up and understand those data centers, those companies, those infrastructure projects are the reason that they are in this way. And in the belief of many, if they're guided by others with ill intention, they will be taken, hey, go attack this, go destroy that. And the Boer Wars are something similar. So this is the Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902. Now, in what is South Africa, there were different regions down there like South African Republic, Orange Free State, Colony of Natal, and the Cape Colony. But inside there were a group of people, the Boers, and lo and behold, the British found gold in two of the Boer stronghold areas. The British were like, got to leave. They're like, no, we're not leaving this. What? Yeah. What? No. So then the Boers started a guerrilla war because they were able to move through their environment as ghosts. And they were able to get sustenance from every farm because in the people's eyes, they were the freedom fighters against this nasty, British machine gobbling up everything. So the Boers were absolutely welcomed into every single home. They were sustained through the farms. And this is where it comes in to today. So if you knew where the threat was coming from, the sustenance for the Boers was given by the locals with the farms, with the local farms, fed, housed. Well, then the British are like, okay, well, they're fighting a guerrilla war. Much like in Vietnam, the Americans learned that, a lot of the soldiers are being fed in local villages. And then we started spraying Agent Orange everywhere to defoliate, toxify the crops. Went in with that Zippo raid type of thing and the search and destroy missions. That's exactly what the British did. They targeted every single farm. They took out the women and children. They burned the homes like the Bolsheviks did. And what is now Ukraine, further back in time, in the Holodomor, when that whole system of remove the people, burn the crops, burn the house, destroy the tools, keep the seed for yourself as a food stuff, and then move on. That's what the British did as well. Now, if we see this repeating pattern in history where every time there's a resistance that pops up for whatever it is, it could be a corporate, could be a military, could be now an AI invasion of a country, there's always going to be people who resist. So notice, take that into fact, though. They go after the farms every single time. So the Holodomor, that was a mass starvation thing. The same thing with the Boer War, mass starvation. And then they went out and just absolutely razed everything to the ground. Same thing in Vietnam. American soldiers were doing the same. So take that lesson from history. Even if you're way out on a farm out here and you have nothing to do with any of the backlash that's going on from the people, they're coming for your farm and they're going to get you out of the house. They're not going to let these people roam the countryside, finding food. Oh, you have a farm, they have a farm. They're going to absolutely do the same thing. Well, this universal basic income is going to be the ultimate opposition for humanity against that machine that is powering it, wiping out your jobs, reducing your productivity, and absolutely taking your lifestyle down to the most minimal, where you literally get up and you can breathe and eat, and then you got to go back to sleep because that's all the money you have, if you're allowed to stay where you are. So this is going to quickly turn into anger and is quickly going to turn into a movement. And wherever these data centers are, and wherever the infrastructure is, could be cables, could be water pipes, wherever it is to go out to keep this behemoth chugging along, the pockets of resistance are going to be there. And I mark my words, they're coming to clear out areas as resistance to these areas begins. And hell, that could be AI, autonomous bipedal robots at that point that come running out in forces, or those robotic dogs coming along in packs. It doesn't have to be a human. Doesn't have to be a dude wearing an army or a Marine fatigues or some other, UN force. It could definitely be autonomous and robotic coming out at you. But whatever happens, they're going to destroy the farms again, the sustenance for the resistances. And that's just the way it's going to be in history. And it always has been. So keep that on your radar.
Yeah. The MIT Technology Review website had a thing. Quite a few years ago, I got very interested in like what causes riots, right? There was an article about the cause of riots and the price of food. And it was written up by the Institute for Complex Systems. And being the Institute for Complex Systems, they thought that it was going to have a lot of complexity to it. And they were quite shocked to find out there's only one single variable that causes riots. And these guys actually have a mathematical formula, and it's based on the cost of food. And when the cost of food rises above a certain amount, then they know with absolute certainty that civil unrest is going to break out in that area. If you think, in fact, they had it dialed in. In fact, they knew that the Arab Spring was going to break out like a few weeks before it did. And the authors of the paper were like, they were trying to call the US government or trying to call somebody, who do you call if you have that kind of information? There's no hotline for that. But if you think about it, this is something that's been known throughout history by all of our so-called rulers or managers. The Romans used to say, give them bread and games and they'll never revolt. Henry Kissinger, you control the food, you control the people. And you think about it, like as long as you're comfortable, you're not going to rally too much. I mean, but as soon as Joe Sixpack, his kids can't eat, he's getting off the couch. And he's going to find somebody to blame, and he's going to go find something to do about it. And that's how civil unrest occurs. And it's just directly tied to the price of food, which is why the loss in dollar valuation. That's why the crop losses. That's why everything that you've been talking about for all these years is so important, because it's not just, oh, we're going to all go on a massive diet and lose 20 pounds. It's going to be because we are going to see increasing levels of violence everywhere.
It won't be Joe's six pack. It'll be Joe who quit drinking because he couldn't afford the alcohol because he can't even afford to feed the family. So the alcohol is going to go first. So I know a lot of people turn to alcohol during these times and different kind of things that make you numb. And I'll just leave that there. It's a family friendly program, YouTube family friendly advertiser program. So I'll leave those other, enjoyables out of there. But a lot of people turn to that after. But in the beginning, people are going to be trying to slash costs. And you can't tell me a hungry wife and two hungry kids and dude's still sitting around drinking beer. No, honey, I need the extra $10 for this for my thing every 2 days or one day or whatever. The children are like, Dad, you got to stop. We need the food. So those kind of things are going to get cut first. So it's just going to be Joe. Joe ain't going to have a six pack. Can't afford it. It's going to go straight into like buying bulk foods. And I'm just wondering now, Marjorie, you might know better than me. Like, when is there going to be this transition away from like boxed, packaged, and junk foods into sort of like bulk bought foods that are prepared at home? Because if people have less work or they're unemployed completely, then they have the time to actually prepare the meal, because that's the excuse why people don't cook at home. Well, it takes too long to cook. You're unemployed. You can work from home, awesome, but like, when does this transition occur from people buy bulk foods away from processed box packaged foods, but then there'll be more a demand on the bulk foods, but maybe that supply chain's not there. I'm not sure, because a lot of it's going to be seasonal. Tariff war absolutely is, in my opinion, the be all end all excuse for everything you're seeing right now. Everything can be explained away. Now, if you want to reduce a world's food supply, you would cut that food distribution first. So if we get down to regionalization, that means we're going to come down into seasonality only foods available. So that's going to rock a lot of people's psyches. I can't get my strawberries in January. What? Okay. So walk me through that whole process there. Like, these things are getting plugged in for play right now.
Well, we are seeing a big uptick in people doing backyard food production. And I'd say usually it's the women who get together and start saying, okay, well, we're going to buy in bulk now. One thing that has really astonished me, and now the Grow Network in my community, we're mostly, women my age, right? That's the predominant. And we grew up and we knew how to cook. What has absolutely astonished me is there are people asking me, could I teach them how to cook? And I'm like, you don't know how to cook? Like, so it's the problem is actually much, much bigger than I ever even fathomed before. There's a whole generation of people that went out to eat all the time, or shove something into a microwave, and they don't that's all they know how to do is operate the microwave. So it's huge. Now, I think we're fracturing in so many ways. And one of the ways is the people who are proactive and saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to start doing that. I'm buying in bulk, I'm doing this, or I'm starting to grow food. And then the other people who are like, they're just lost. Yeah, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to do it. And I think it's so overwhelming for them, they can't do anything. And those are I'd say that's the large masses, and those are the extremely dangerous people. I do want to say, with the egg prices that spiked up to, like, it was like, depending on where you were, anywhere from $9 to $15 a dozen for eggs. And now they've gone down a little bit. I think, first of all, let me say that kind of volatility in prices is a clear indication of the instability of the whole system. And I can guarantee you that egg prices are going to go back up again. There's no doubt. It's kind of like cacao, right? Remember the cacao shot way up. I mean, it was like the poster child for hyperinflation, and then it went back down, and now it's shot back up again. We're going to see that more and more with all these different food commodities. But one of the consequences of that was a lot of people all of a sudden said, hey, I think I want to have chickens in my backyard. And prior to this show, I went on to a couple of different hatcheries that I used to buy from. You cannot buy a baby chick anywhere. Like, a lot of the hatcheries said, nope, forget it, completely unavailable, never. And then the best scenario was was we'll deliver them in October. If you want some now, we could get them to you in October, we think. So the market for baby chicks is not that big, right? There aren't that many people who do backyard food production. So that market can be completely saturated and overwhelmed in just a very short period of time. Here's something interesting, though. I always believe there's always a way around, right? There's always a way around. And if you really, again, open your heart and open your mind, and you will be guided. And so one thing I noticed on the hatcheries was uh, duck babies, egg-laying ducks. There were plenty of those available. People hadn't thought about that. And the other thing is, I went on to Craigslist. I looked in the Austin, the Phoenix, and the Philadelphia market, and there were grown laying hens available on Craigslist for anywhere from $20 to $75, depending on the breed or the location. So, but you gotta do this and get in on this now ahead of time. I think that the high egg prices spiking is a warning. And I believe that there are warnings and there are gifts to you if you pay attention to them, that that the universe or whatever will let you know what's coming. And that was an indication. Yeah, you need to start getting some backyard. Oh, you need to start growing food. You need to get something, a laying flock in your backyard. By the way, I don't recommend people start chickens from chicks because it takes a different set of skill set and equipment to raise them, and it takes 6 months for a laying hen to come to age. So I really recommend you buy some laying hens that are already about 6 months old, and in two, like, think about it, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you over a couple of weekends, you build the chicken coop. If you don't have those skills, you get somebody to build it for you, create a run, coop and run, buy some feed, get some water, do that before you get the chickens. That's the voice of experience there. Um, and then go buy some laying hens. And then once, it takes a couple of days for them to settle in and they'll start laying. Bam, you've got breakfast every morning handled, right? It's and initially buy the food for the chickens. It's still relatively what we call cheap as chicken feed, right? It's still chicken feed. Um, and there are ways to completely feed your chickens for free with different scraps and insects you can grow and other things that you can find. So you do also have to worry about the whole supply chain. But going back to my point is these markets, because there is not a huge amount of backyard food production going on, these markets, what's available can get completely oversaturated in a very, very short period of time. And my prediction is seeds. And I notice you've got True Leaf there. I really recommend people start stocking up on seeds. I think there's going to be a run on seeds. And that happened in 2020. I had different producers, from New York calling me up and like, where can we get some seeds? These poor people live in Manhattan and they're freaking out because it's 2020 and New York City was the epicenter of the whole scare. They were like, where can I get some seeds? I'm like, it's okay, it's okay. Yeah, they're all sold out in the Northeast, but go over here or go over there and you can pick some up. But the seeds all disappeared. So the early adopters do have an advantage, and you've been given a couple of warnings. You need to start doing this right now. This is happening. It's happening right now. And you're going to be way better off anyway. Your own homegrown food. You're going to become healthier. You'll be a lot happier. You'll be more secure.
Marjory, let me be a devil's advocate here. Well, yeah, this whole thing happened in 2020, but look, we're still here, and the world's still continuing to spin. So now you're trying to scare me again and tell me I need to start growing immediately again. Well, it didn't really. We survived through COVID through 2020 and now all the way to 2025, and the world's pretty much the same as it was. Just things are a little more expensive. Why are you still trying to scare me? Why now? You're just trying to tell me the same thing. Maybe it'll be this time and everything will smooth out again by 2028 or 29. Well, I mean, this is what I hear routinely. When I had tried to warn. So I'm just looking at it from your
No, I hear
perspective
you.
here.
Yeah, I'm with some friends and we're talking about prepper fatigue. Like, how long can you wait for the end of the world as we know it? So there are things that happen. And as I mentioned, we're seeing spikes in food prices. We've already seen food prices pretty much double in the last couple of years, if that's not a wake-up call. And now we have these tariffs going on. It's very clear we're in a tariff war. David's been talking to you about Yanasa TV. There's so many people have been talking about the ongoing war on small farmers and the loss of crop production. Like, how long are you going to wait? You going to keep waiting? Oh, nothing's going on. I mean, the sun's rising and I'm still going to work. If you've still got a job, how many people have been laid off? I just want to say, I got into growing my own food in my backyard out of fear and panic because I woke up very suddenly to what was going on in the world. And I will tell you, it has healed me on every single level. The produce, the nutrient rich, vibrant, alive, clean food, the process of growing food, emotionally knowing that I don't have to worry about the grocery stores closing. When you eat higher quality food, you are more intelligent. There are tons of studies that prove this. So, and then working with your hands in the soil, you're working directly with forces of creation. And I will tell you that magic happens. So every level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes from this one simple activity. So really, really recommend you get started. I've done everything I can to make it easy and simple for you. So head over to, yeah, Homegrown 2030.
See you next time. Bye for now.